This is an instructional video showing how to change machine serial number M474 and M475 to change over container sizes. We're going to demonstrate changing over from plastic 1-gallon containers to metal quart containers.
So this is showing the changeover from the pails to quarts. So this machine has already been set up with the pail line stop gauge, so it fits over all the line stops. And you can loosen them all and use the quart line stop gauge to reset the line stops for quarts. Now the line stops are set up for quarts. After getting all the front line stops and sensors lined up, we now need to move the back reflectors so the sensor's beam can be made. So you just want to loosen the back reflector and move it until the red light comes up on the sensor, and then that confirms that the beam is being made. So we will now set the height of the fill heads to the container that we'll be filling to. So you just use the carriage handle adjustment to lower the heads down. And you want to lower the heads until they're about just 1/4 of an inch above the container. So we'll now adjust the guide rails to keep the containers centered within the chain. So what you want to do is go along and loosen all of the guide rail brackets, put a can down, and start moving the guide rails in. So you move the front one and the back one. What you want to do is center the can on the chain and then just set the guide rails so they're about 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch off of the container so it can still move around and is not being pinched. And you want to go along and do that to all 4 sets of guide rail adjustments. The container can still move and is centered but not pinched. So now one of the most important steps to remember is to adjust the turret so you don't fill the incorrect volume into your container. So we were set to gallons before, and we're just going to adjust it to the quart setting. You pull the pin on the side, turn the turret until it locks into the quart position. After setting up the fill area for quarts, you'll now move on to setting up the lid placer with a quart lid. So loosen all of the kip handles and pinch the lid guide bars closed until the lid can sit on the bottom escapements and wiggle around freely but not fall out. Then tighten down all the kip handles and make sure that the lid is still moving freely. Then you can fill the dropper with lids and it's ready to run. After setting up the lid dropper, you now need to lower the dropper and press assembly to the height of your container. And lower the press until the very last roller is just touching the top of your container. And then we have a counter on top that you can mark the number it's at so you can get back to the exact same height every time. And there are 4 Acme nuts on all 4 corners. And it is important to tighten those down for continuous running. The lid placing units here are set up only to run one type of lid, so there's no adjustments that need to be made there. But when you're not running the plastic pails that use that lid, you just use the handle here to to wind it up and out of the way so it does not interfere with your other container sizes. To set the height of the lid placers up with the plastic pails, you want to ensure that the lip inside of the lids, it just catches the top seam of the pail. Right about there is exactly how you want it. The HMI is housed in an explosion-proof enclosure, which means you cannot utilize the touchscreen options on it. So instead, we have this mouse down here that you must use to navigate the HMI. The middle button is used to move the mouse around, and we use the lower left-hand button to select any options. The HMI is a very important part of the machine. You can go here to find a lot of information about the machine. This is the run screen, and this is the screen it'll be on first startup. From here you can start and stop both the front and rear conveyor individually. And you can see the position of all the pumps. And you can also view any alarms that are currently on the machine. The other information this screen has on it is the total throughput for each track individually, as well as the total machine. From here, you can hit the yellow bar at the top of the page to navigate between the menu pages and the run screen. This is the first of 3 menu pages within the HMI. Next to the Edit Recipe button is the Choose Lanes button. Here you can select whichever combination of fill heads you would like to run. You could run just one fill head, or if you're only wanting to run the rear track, you can run just lanes 1 and 2, but you can also run any combination that you would like. Press Exit and it will take you back to the menu page. Next to Choose Lanes, we have Batch Control. Within Batch Control, you can enter how many containers you would like to run before the machine stops. For example, 1,000 containers. After 1,000 containers have been run through the machine will automatically stop. This is great if you have a certain batch size that you need to count out. To use this feature, you must hit Start Cycle from the menu page. If you use the regular Start Cycle push button, it will not start the batch counter. Next up, we have the sensor screen. The sensor screen is great for troubleshooting, as it will show you all of the sensors and whether they are currently made or not. For example, head 3 here, if I flag it with my hand, turns on and off. Next, we have some counters for the machine. This is great for maintenance personnel, as they can see how many cycles each pump has done. It says here that if you log in, you can reset those counters. There is also a reminder that you can set once you've logged in to say how long you want to go before you rebuild the pumps. So you could set this to 1,000, and when the pump cycles reach 1,000, a reminder will come up telling you to rebuild the pumps. Next up, we have the login page. This is where your maintenance staff or supervisors can log in to access some other settings, which we'll go over later. Next is the language selection page. So here you can switch between English and Spanish, but also keep in mind that down in the bottom corner of every page, there's a button that you can click to switch between English and Spanish. Next up on this menu page is the About screen. This just lets you know what model number your machine is. and what the versions of the programs in it are. This is helpful if you ever have to access the PLC, you know what program number you need. So we can hit next. The next menu is the manual conveyor screen. From here you can select either the front track or the rear track's conveyor, and you can change all the settings for it and start and stop it manually. The next menu is manual lid placers. Here you'll be able to manually activate all of the mechanisms on the lid placing units. Within this page you can select either the front or the rear lid placer, and when something is turned on the button goes yellow so you're aware that it's on. If anything is left on, when you do a reset of the machine they will automatically go off. Next up is manual fill heads. Here you can open and close all the fill heads individually to drain them of product before you switch heads. Next is pumps manual, and here you can either extend or retract the pumps manually. Now keep in mind, if you do this, the fill head will have to open up to allow the product out. Next up is flush heads. Here you can select which heads to flush, and lane 1 isn't showing up because we've got it turned off within the choose lanes. Next up is lanes manual, where you can manually control all of the options within each individual lane. The recipe menu is probably the most important menu that you'll find within the HMI. Here you will find all of your recipes, of which you can store up to 100. We have the first 8 recipes locked, so you cannot edit them. You'll notice that the button goes away and says unable to edit recipe when one of them is selected. We did this so that you have a base point to work off of for any new recipes you would like to make. If you select a recipe that is not one of the first 8, you'll notice that this next button comes up and you can go in to the recipe to edit it. Here you'll find lots of timers and options pertaining to the particular container size that you're wanting to run. The most important ones start with this page. Here you will find the conveyor speed, whether or not you have your lid detection turned on, how long you want a lid to be detected, and also your in-feed gating timers. These in-feed gating timers are used to create a gap between containers so they can be detected by the sensors when they have no natural gap. On the next page here, you'll find your lid placing options. You can either place plastic lids with the lid placer, no lids at all, or metal lids with the lid dropper. So after making all your mechanical changes, you're going to want to go to the HMI and navigate to the recipe menu page. And then you're going to want to select the recipe for the container size, which is quart front. Hit load recipe to edit, and then load recipe onto the front track, which is the track you're running. If you would like to create a new recipe, I recommend starting from one of the 8 locked recipes that come with the machine. In this example, we'll use the pint recipe. So here you can see that you cannot edit this pint recipe. So whatever recipe you'd like to copy, make sure that you load that recipe and then hit copy. under New Recipe, click that and select the new recipe that you'd like to load to. I know that recipe 10 is unused. So we'll enter 10, and now you click on this and enter the name of the new recipe that you'd like it to be. So we're just going to name this one new. Hit enter, and then hit copy. And now, when you go back, you will see that under recipe 10, it is new. And if we load that recipe, all of the settings from the pint recipe that we copied are now in this recipe as well. This is a great way to make small changes without messing up a current recipe that you know works. When you select a recipe that uses the lid dropper, you will hear a 1.5 second audible alarm, and then the lid dropper will lower. After the machine is unpacked and in place, there are a few electrical and pneumatic connections you will need to make in order for the lid placers to work. There are 2 pneumatic connections. And 3 electrical connections. For the electrical connections, make sure that you're pairing up the correct cables with one another. In order to change a fill head, first place a pail underneath the head you're wanting to change to catch any product that's going to come out, and then on the HMI, navigate to the manual fill heads page, and then open the fill head that you're wanting to change, and allow any product to drain out. While it's open, loosen the clamp to help with draining. Once all the product is drained out, you can close the fill head. With the fill head closed, you can now release the quick connect couplings we have on the airlines by pulling back on the fittings. And both will come off. And you can then release the clamp the rest of the way to remove the fill head. You can now take your new fill head and put the seal between the clamp and the transfer tube. Tighten the clamp and reconnect the quick fittings. To remove the pump cart, first start by disconnecting the hoses going to the fill heads. After disconnecting all of the hoses from the pump cart, it's now time to remove the air and power from the cart. There is 1 electrical quick connection and 5 pneumatic quick connections. After you have assured all of the connections have been disconnected from the pump cart, you can now pull it out from underneath the machine. To first start up the machine, make sure that the purge has power to it. Twist the power switch to provide power to the panel. And turn the air on. Once the air turns on, this is when the purge will initiate its purging process. After the purge is completed, power will be provided to the panel of the machine. The purge must be on and operational in order to run the machine. Without it, the control panel will have no power. This is the control screen for the purge, and you shouldn't need to do much with it unless you're required to go into bypass mode in order to open the door and maintain power to the machine. To do that, the machine, or the purge, must first be purged, and you must see enclosure power. Next, you can hit the setup button and input the password to access the setup menu. After that, you scroll through the menu to get down to control bypass and hit start. And there is a separate bypass password with one extra character. After that, make sure that bypass is enabled, and then you can turn bypass on. When the bypass is on, the system bypass light will be on. Now you can open the door and maintain power. It is important to remember that you cannot go into bypass without the enclosure first being purged. So when you first start up the machine, you cannot just go straight into bypass. You must wait for the enclosure to purge, and then you can go into bypass and open the door. If you open the door with the purge bypass on, power will be maintained. If you open the door with the purge bypass turned off, the enclosure power will be lost. As soon as the purge recognizes that the door has been shut, the purging process will begin. After the purge initiation cycle, the actual purging will begin. The purge measures the flow rate of air exiting the box and determines how much air it needs to pass through the box to safely purge the enclosure. This counter lets you know how far along the purge is. It will eventually reach 100%. This will take about 10 to 12 minutes. Once the purge has reached 100% of its cycle, the enclosure power will be turned on and the machine will start powering up.